Meeting. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We do have a pretty full agenda tonight, and also this is the first time that we have professional video. And because we have a number of guests, if you'll allow me, I'll just take a minute or two to tell everybody where we are on the process of the Charter Review Commission, and we'll also introduce the commissioners that are here. So as I said, this is the 9th commission meeting, and we are already about a quarter of the way through a one-year term. And generally speaking, we've organized our work into 4 phases. The first was just to get organized. The second phase, which we are in now, is to try to get as many proposals on the table as possible so that we can discuss and deliberate on them most efficiently. And that's where we are now. We have, I believe, 70 formal proposals that have been put on forms. If you put them on a form, it will force us to vote very formally on that in the next phase. And I expect at least another 10 to 15 or more proposals that have already been submitted from the town clerk and the school committee. So we're nearing 100 proposals already, which I think is great. So those proposals come to us, they get triaged, and they are then brought up for preliminary discussion and preliminary voting as time permits, so that we stay efficient. We may get to some of that tonight, we may not, depending on our schedule. And then starting in January, we will again set these for formal voting in that phase, and then there's a cushion at the end for finalization. So that's where we are today. And so we have a number of invited committees and officials here from the government. And again, this is the introductory presentation phase. Generally speaking, folks have been given 3 to 5 minutes. This is not a time for us. We shouldn't be debating you. We won't challenge you. We might ask some clarifying questions, but this is really your kind of opportunity to put the first proposal on the table, and then we come back again to schedule it later. So, having said that, Jeff, do you mind just introducing yourself? We'll just go around really quick.
My name is Jeff Karen.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'm Bill Lopes.
Nancy Driggs.
Robert Coulter.
Donna Cook.
And Steve Clark.
Great, thank you. Donna is your vice chair, and Jeff and Nancy are assistant secretaries. Jeff is handling much of the triage work on the first half of the phase of the one-year term, and Nancy's going to be helping with coordinating a lot of the legal drafting on the second half of the term. We are 3 individuals are not present tonight, but that is Richard Rahm is our secretary, and Justin LaCroix, and also Ray Fougere. So we do have 9 in all. So having said that, what I'd like to suggest, however you're comfortable, you don't have to sit at the podium. If you'd like to sit at the table, we'll just go down the line. Chief Lloyd from the fire department, this is your opportunity to come on up, and if you have a formal proposal, that's great. If you have some initial comments, that's just fine as well.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter. My only question is that my only input I'd like to put in is for Tiverton Emergency Management, and that has been, I gave you a copy of that through but the administrator is working on that, and we'll put that on your formalized sheet. That is about the only thing I really would like to comment on here for you this evening, is that with this, I looked at what state law is. I'm not sure the whole committee has it, but trying to bring it more in line with current law for the state and for Tiverton, to bring us into the more with disaster recovery and what emergency management does. So I am proposing that to you, following almost exactly what state law is.
So again, no particular change in business processes, just as a conformity with state law for efficiency.
I believe that there is what the administrator has put forward is some strike-throughs, and then my wording in there, and that's what we're looking to submit. It will be section 904 in the charter.
Okay. That was very prompt. Are there any questions, again, not for debate, but any clarifying questions from the commissioners?
So this document will be, I'm sorry, this document will be issued at some later date?
That's right. So I have one copy of some draft language to section 904. As soon as I think I was just speaking with town administrator before the meeting, we'll get this buttoned up and the paperwork will send it out to the whole commission. But you're already ahead of the curve because you actually have, I should have made clear, you're not required to come as prepared as Chief Lloyd and actually have wording changes. You can just bring a concept and we'll do the work. But so this is just great, and I'll make sure this gets circulated.
If I may, for the commissioner, is that because we're running concurrently and the date I was asked to be here is the same date that the council is meeting, this is also being submitted to the council for their approval, and I believe it will be in their formal packet if they adopt it, to bring it forward to the commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just ask, how are we not in compliance right now?
The way it was, it had a hierarchy of attrition that did not conform with where the state law is. Emergency management, and the emergency management director would have direct ties to Rhode Island Emergency Management, and there are certifications that fall within that allow us to be able to work for disaster recovery, disaster response and such. So this comes in conformity with, this is almost exactly the same wording that I have submitted as to what state law has in its place.
Thank you.
So this gets harder every meeting as we add more content and more people, but I'm going to still try. Is there anybody from the public that would like to ask a clarifying question? If so, we have to be a little more formal and come to the microphone for the sake of the video. Any questions from the public? Okay, hearing none. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much for
keep you up
listening.
to date. Great.
Thank you.
Ms. Janet Holmes is our new Senior Center Director. I just had the pleasure of meeting Janet just a few moments ago. Again, if you'd like to see whatever you're comfortable with,
Sure.
and it's your time.
I just have, the town administrator had put a proposal in with submitted his draft. And basically, it's just changing the Director Senior Citizen Center, moving it from the town officials and offices into the departments and agencies. We're treated like a department, and so physically moving it over to section 910, and then just giving a little bit more of a definition of powers and responsibilities. Which I'm assuming that he gave you this draft already, that you have a copy of this. If not, you can take mine.
We do have an advanced copy, but we're going to wait
Okay.
till the council blesses it, and we'll take it into the record.
Oh,
So
okay.
no problem at all.
But that's all that I have, is just to more of a clarifying of responsibilities, and then just moving it from officials to department in the charter. So it would move down to section 910 is what was proposed. But that's all that I really have for you.
Any questions from the commission? Any questions from the public? You almost beat Chief Lloyd's record. I don't know. That was pretty good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chief Blakey, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The provisions of the current charter are sufficient for the police department. Of course, we have our own policies and procedures which encompass in this actually, so I don't see any changes necessary.
So you did beat Chief Lloyd's record.
Beg your pardon?
The fastest presentation ever. I suspect we'll have no questions for you. I appreciate the courtesy of you appearing.
No questions?
Any questions from the commission?
Did you just say no changes?
So-
I have no changes. Everything is incorporated. You have questions for me? That's why I'm here.
Great. Any questions from the public? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I might have mentioned too, Donna has done a very nice job of coordinating our outreach to, I think, every single board, commission, council, department head, official, and we do get some feedback comes in by email, and we have a tracker that makes sure that we've reached out once, twice, sometimes 3 times, so that we get as much input as possible. Okay. Next up is Mr. David Robert, our town tax. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me,
Yeah,
sir.
Rob, could I make a comment before the two chiefs leave here, hopefully? I think
Oh.
we got one. I'd like to have the police chief here if we could get him.
Grab Chief Lakey?
Yeah, would you please?
We will spend 5 minutes per item, one way or another. There'll be no. We have the police chief returning, which is not every day I get to issue a summons for the police chief to come back. So,
You're not the first to do that,
so
so
Mr. Lopes has a
Chief,
question.
I
before you-
apologize for
It's
not
okay.
speaking up sooner. As many of us know, there's been some controversy between the town council and other members in the town about the justification for hiring new employees. And I guess what I'm wondering about as we look at the charter is what in the current charter defines the way in which either chief or any department, I guess, that wants to add people, how they go about justifying that to the town council, who I'm assuming makes the decision. You recently had a situation where I guess there were several people that you added to the force.
Correct.
Or are going to add, I'm not sure of the exact,
Beg your pardon?
or you are going to add. I
No,
don't
I
know if
have.
You have added.
We have, sir, yes.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, I was not at that town council meeting where you made your presentation and so forth, and that addition was approved. But it occurred to me, as we're going through this charter, I think there's going to be more opportunity as the town grows, as our understanding of our needs and commitments to the casino grow. And I'm just wondering, how do we help you and the town council members and administrator go about determining, you know, exactly when we add people and what the background and justification might be. So do you have some thoughts that you can share with us on
Yes,
how we
I do.
can handle that? Or should we be thinking about language in the charter?
Let me answer your first question, if I may. The first thing we do is, it's not an arbitrary number you just pick out of there are some numbers supplied by the federal government. And their estimate, the federal standards are two sworn officers per 1,000 people. Now, that's a general across-the-board number. This is for police, by the way, not fire. But that doesn't take into consideration, this could be a town that may be a tourist attraction, have seasonal help. There may be a situation, and this is very applicable to Tiverton, where we have the 8th largest city in Massachusetts with a crime rate that's extremely high. That invisible border doesn't just withstand all comers. The thing that keeps most of the people out of Rhode Island, as I can tell you as a veteran Massachusetts officer, is the fact is they don't get out of jail as quickly or as easily once you cross over that state line. And believe me, as law enforcement officers, that does deter the knowledgeable criminal from coming over here. To answer your question about how we could determine that locally, is the fact that we have statistics that we measure every month. As you know, we supply the council with a monthly report. Our statistics, our numbers of arrests, our citations, court action, overtime is all generated and given to the council, to them to give us a basis, if you will, cost comparative numbers to other communities our size. Everything is added into it. This particular case you're speaking of was viewed at, as being a chief for 14 years and a police officer 42 years plus, and coming into Rhode Island, which has a unique situation, there are 2 police academies annually. And when you weigh that into the hiring process and getting officers on the road against overtime costs, you try to anticipate what's coming up. Seeing the department at the stage it was in when I first made my recommendations to Mr. Wojcik, the then administrator, we looked at ongoing investigations. We had some IOD people, injured on duty people. We had people who were leaving. We had applications, background check applications from other agencies that our people had applied for. And always keeping in mind, we're trying to replace people. That's somewhat of a, we're limited for, it's going to, so to get an officer started, it usually takes 18 months to get a person cleared on the road, depending on the timetable, and then take into consideration on that. So all these things enter into how we make our determinations about going forward and making recommendations to the council. They have the ultimate say. I can tell you from the last particular case itself, there was the ball got dropped on whose ever part it was. I think the council didn't feel that they were included enough into it. And that was, I think, was the hinge pin for the confusion or the little bit of disruption that's going on. But we're not growing, and as a matter of fact, I'm leaving, and there's one vacancy if we promote from within, and we have another officer right now whose background check is in process, and he could be very well going by the first of the year. So there are two vacancies, as everything moves up with the promotion, if you will, if the chain of command, and then that would take, we wouldn't get another person in the academy till July. They would not be cleared for the road until the end of March of next year, of 2018. So that's how it would, the evolution would happen.
Okay. Now,
Did that help at all, or was it too lengthy?
It does. Is there a defined process? I mean, you've obviously done a good job in describing a process. I
Okay.
just don't know, is it defined somewhere, either in the language of your department, or at the town
May I
council
ask you a
level?
question for clarification?
Yes.
Defined process for what, please, sir?
For adding personnel.
Adding personnel, I would say no. I would say we're trying to meet the standard of keeping people on the road and minimizing overtime when we can. The defined process of doing so, absolutely, it's an intense process, and it takes 3 to 6 months to get it done. But to say there's an actual defined process to say these are the numbers we need, I think that would have to work out with the number of calls for assistance, calls for, and again, always the overtime accounts as well. And actually, keeping the number of people, quality of life issues on the community, keeping the number of cars on the road available. Tiverton is 33 square miles, as you know, and we have no good, I don't say bad roads, we have no good high-speed roads to get from one end to another. And I can tell you, I'll bring this back as I have to the council, a boxer in a ring takes 3 minutes. That's the length of a round in a prize fight. And you could throw a lot of punches in 3 minutes. So when you have one officer on that end of the town, and there's one officer down there, you can throw an awful lot of punches in 3 minutes, waiting for your backup. And every time there's any arrest of any kind, 2 officers are off the road. That leaves me with 1 car with a minimum staffing issue. So these are things that we want to take care of for the community. We do have to watch the budget, absolutely, but you have to be cognizant of the fact that officer safety and public safety.
Jeff Johnson.
I'm going to follow up with a little bit of information for Bill. I want to ask a question of the chief, though. So when the initial decision was made to put these people into the academy, had the town not followed through a month ago or whenever it happened and on the hiring, would we have had to pay like unemployment or anything like that for these people?
Would we be required to? Yes. Would we
We
have
would.
to? No. I already got them jobs elsewhere.
Okay, but so we would have been on the hook for that, okay. But you had jobs ready to go for them in other places, okay, thank you for that. Bill, I want to read you, and I'll read it for everybody, since we're on the TV tonight. Page 18 in the charter, organization. This is under 902 Police Department. There shall be other organization, so it's Police Department, A organization, and I'm jumping to the middle. There shall be other subordinate officers, patrolmen, police, special police officers, and employees, as shall be determined from time to time by the town administrator upon the recommendation of the police chief and the approval of the town council. So you asked, is there a process?
What chapter? I'm sorry.
I said I'm in 902, subsection A. So you asked if there was a process, and there's clearly time, as special police laws, as shall be determined from time to time by the town administrator upon recommendation of the police chief and approval of the town council. So that is, that is like how it's supposed to work. So my only question to the chief was, when those six youngsters went to the academy, had the town council approved that?
6 men and women, please.
6 men and women, had they approved that, the town council?
I brought my recommendation to the town administrator.
Which is what it says you're supposed to do,
Which I
correct?
did do, which I had signed letters for. I'm not going to relive history, but I'll tell you, I had signed letters from the administrator allowing me to proceed.
Okay,
What happened back there, I don't know.
so, okay, so I'm not sure in that case, FYI, that the town council had approved it. The chief didn't comment on that. But I think that may have been part of the source of the angst that you sparked this conversation.
As I indicated from my comments in the initial part of the conversation, I said that was, it seemed to be some mix-up, and that's what it was.
Okay.
Okay, I also thought you meant, was there a process to determine that we're going to need more people? I think it'd be a collective agreement between all parties concerned, including the budgetary part of it.
So, yeah, certainly.
Absolutely.
So summarizing the approval process at a high level is in the charter, but there's sort of industry standards that you use to inform the discussion that has a lot of participants, so.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, I'll wait by the door. All right?
Great, thank you so
Walk
much.
slowly
Thank
this
you.
time.
Um,
Is the fire chief still here? Yes, I am. Do you have a similar process, or how
Let's let them come on up, just for the, I'm not trying to be too strict, but for the benefit of the microphone here, we need the,
Yeah. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but
No,
I'm just
no,
trying
that's-
to understand for the purposes of the charter work that we're undertaking, whether there's need for improved language or clarification or whatever that hopefully would help make your job easier in the future as you look at your needs and the need for additional personnel.
Again, like the police chief had said, we sit with the administrator, we go over what our needs and our demands are, and what is the risk-benefit analysis of that, and what is the cost of it? Because there is always a cost associated with it.
Right.
And then during that discussion, if it's determined, then it does go, Mr. Karen is absolutely right, it goes before the council. We ask for permission to either advertise and test for staffing, and then once we have that staffing, we've gone through the entire testing process, then we come back for permission to hire. But again, just like with the chief, sometimes it's a very long process to get them. We've done the same recently with lateral transfers, where we were able to entice other firefighters away from current positions in other departments. But yeah, it takes a while to get it done, but
Now, do
it's
you
not
have
just
a-
helter-skelter, I want to hire 5 more guys. I have to try to justify why I'm looking for that expense or that hiring.
Right. Now, is your process of qualifying an individual, is it the same order of magnitude as the police, an 18-month type of thing?
I'm not sure it's exactly 18 months, but
Yeah.
we have a testing process. They have to go through the application process. They do a test. Then there are oral interviews. Everybody goes before the personnel board. Personnel board will send us a list of potential candidates. My officers and I meet with them. We go through them. Then they are all sent, those that we're looking to hire, how many we are, go for a department physical. We're hoping that they have, because we have to be an equal opportunity employer, we're looking to ensure that everybody has a fair opportunity at it. We may have to get them trained. Currently, it has started where the chief also, they have a state academy. They've just started a fire academy now where we can only get people into the academy at certain times of the year. So if we're looking to hire and they don't have certifications, then they have to go into the fire academy, which is approximately 14 weeks. They'll obtain certain certifications, depending on whether they're basics or cardiacs or paramedic, will depend what additional time they need to train and get certified. But all of our firefighters are level 1, level 2 firefighters certified, hazmat certified, awareness or operations, confined space, and then they have to be licensed by the state to work on the rescues. So it is a lengthy process. It takes
Okay.
time.
All right, well,
And
thank
every
you.
member that we hire serves 1 year of probation. So anytime within that 1 year, we can release them.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I just follow up with again with the charter for clarification purposes. This is section 903, Fire and Rescue Department Organization. So it's somewhat symmetric to the police department. And it says, there shall be other subordinate officers, firefighters, EMTs, and employees as shall be determined from time to time by the town administrator upon recommendation of the fire chief and the approval of the town council. So again, I just am pointing out symmetric type language. I did have a question, though, to the chief, since I wasn't going to bring this up, but since Bill did. So there was a grant that was applied for, which it's my understanding, maybe at the end of, where are we now? What month are we in now?
It was
Over
in
the summer?
January.
In January, there was a grant applied for, which, if it came in, it's my understanding, it would increase the fire department by 33%. Is that roughly accurate? It would go from like 27 to 36?
With discussions with the town administrator, we applied for a SAFER grant. The SAFER grant we were looking to try to hire 9 more guys to get to a staffing level to cut down on overtime and such.
Okay.
But yes, it would hire more guys, yes.
It would hire more, okay. So the grant, it's my memory that before the grant was all done, in the final year or final years, that an increasing amount of the cost of these employees will be borne by the town itself versus the grant. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. So my only question is, so I'm pointing it out to Bill, some of this discussion is that this would have increased the fire department central staffing by 33%, if I did the math right. And my only question is, I don't know what's happened since, but when that was applied for, had the town, I know the town administrator was involved with the chief, I think, on that.
Yes, he was.
Had the town council explicitly approved it, though, when the grant was applied for?
Yes, they did. I
They
had
had-
a letter from them, because I had to put a letter in with the grant, so the council did approve for that grant.
Okay.
Well, that's only part of the story, though, but they okayed the letter, but many of the counselors hadn't or weren't aware of what the grant was.
Ah,
Ish,
I guess that I
but
just want to
that's
suggest,
just another arena.
just to jump in, I mean, if it's a question of, was the process that's already in the charter followed?
I don't think
If-
so.
If it doesn't inform us changing the charter, we don't need to go into too much
No, I
detail
agree.
of that here. But if it's a question, I think that is there something we could do to clarify the language? Or what your question raised in my mind is, are there sources of revenue that are flowing in outside of the FTR? Those are things that I'm jotting down that we might want to take a look into, but I know it's very important, but exactly what happened in that circumstance is, unless there's a specific change that you're suggesting.
No, I think it's working the
no,
way
it's
it
just a
is.
question,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay. Alrighty, run as fast.
Thank you.
Okay.
to
set.
both.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that brings us to Mr. David Robert, our tax assessor, who I've come to understand also slides a little information technology in on the side.
Just a little bit.
Your floor.
Good evening. So I'm a bit confused. I thought through the town administrator or town council that you would have had our suggestions at this point. I'm kind of picking up that you don't have any documentation in front of you.
We do not. We did receive an advance copy of a memo from the town administrator to the council about, I think it was early September,
Okay.
but we haven't formally acted on it because it hasn't been sort of formally blessed by the.
hasn't been
submitted
to
yeah.
Right.
But I did speak with Paul, and I know he's encouraging all of you to share, at least conceptually. You certainly don't have to have the exact language, so if you'd like to introduce the concept now, this is a great time to do it.
Good. Thank you. So under Article 6, Section 604, That is a section that explains the duties and responsibilities of the tax assessor. They outline currently 1, 2, 3 duties and responsibilities, all of which are fairly vague in nature. So I am suggesting adding item number 4, which would go into greater detail about the specific job duties that the assessor is required to perform, with the catch-all at the end, or any other duty as requested by the town administrator that is related to tax assessment issues. So I can go into that line item if you want, or wait until a further date when you have the documentation in front of you.
What was the catch-all language, I'm sorry, or any other?
I'll just read the whole thing, it's not that long. So item number 4, it would be administrative duties including but not limited to department budgets, maintaining ownership records, processing personal exemptions, field inspection of building permits, annual review of tangible business accounts, handling the property assessment appeals. Didn't print page 2. And it goes on to attending all border review assessment hearings and any other request by the town administrator that is related to property assessment.
Just, I don't want to put you too much on the spot, and I'm not debating it, but we're getting a lot of these requests to beef up the charter in terms of job descriptions, and I think there's actually been some proposals from at least one commissioner to actually bake in minimum qualifications. And I'm just curious, because you don't have to put all this stuff in the charter. You could just have a one sentence, there shall be a tax assessor, and then leave it up to, the position description could be done by,
Right.
management, so to speak. So the
Yeah, we've
council
actually kind of
administrator.
had some informal discussions regarding that.
And do you feel like it's important to actually have that in the charter?
I think it would be more important to empower the personnel board to come up with specific job qualifications, because they do change from time to time depending on the position. For instance, in my department, right now there is no requirement, although under my duties that I've added, I didn't mention that because page 2 wouldn't print out, but I recall that there's some specific language dealing with GIS implementation. GIS is going to become much more important to cities and towns moving forward. So I think as times change and needs of the community change, I think the personnel board would be the best board to adjust with the times, instead of having something within a town charter that is basically locked in place for 6 years or potentially 10 years. This way, I leave next year, the personnel board has the opportunity to look for someone that does have GIS experience, and I'm just using it as one example. But that's not captured currently in the town charter nor the proposed change. But that's just one example. There are other aspects of my job, of other departments' jobs that do change frequently. So I would suggest empowering the personnel board.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Donna, then Jeff? Go ahead. Yep. Go ahead, Donna.
You're looking through other charters, so they do have specific information as to what they want for appointed, very important department heads. It's in other charters.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't find this out of the way. I see it in other charters.
I wasn't speaking specifically whether or not
Yeah,
it's a good
so
idea
that
or not, but I just think to give some flexibility to the town, given the power to the personnel board, I think might be the best. But you're right, it's another charter. Personally, the charter changes that you have suggested wouldn't impact me at all, but it may impact the position down the road.
Well, there's only one instance that I know of that we have specific needs for the building inspector.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the town council and administrator decided to just put that aside and decided to hire someone that wasn't qualified, and not to the specifics of what the charter said anyway. and decided then to actually pay for this person to get the qualifications, which was going to cost the town instead of the person already having it, but he didn't have what he really needed, and it didn't work out. I think you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, it didn't work out. A lot of wasted time, wasted money, and we had to once again go out and try to hire a building inspector because we tried not paying attention to what the qualifications could be. And the personnel board, you know, went along with this also, so it was just a complete failure. So I'm not for that, you know, and it lends itself to, I'll use the word shenanigans. That's what happened. So I'd rather have it in the charter, because then I know you got to go by something.
Sure, completely understand.
And you can go a little bit here and there, but that was kind of, that was not good.
Jeff?
Thank you. I had a question. So the origin of, I'm looking at a document here called Town Administrator Proposed Changes Draft. And I don't know if I got it off that table here or if it's what you just read. But it's got a number 4. Is that what you just read?
Correct. Yeah, I didn't have all of it with me, so I think I got cut off after
Just, sorry to
handling
interrupt.
the property assessment appeals.
I think what you have is actually not our packet. I think that's a town council
Yeah, it
packet.
was sitting
so
over
just
here, and
wanna
I
make
don't
sure
know
we're clear for the record what we're all looking at, so.
Okay.
Because we have not yet received a formal submission.
All right.
But
It's
speak
pretty
to
much
it. I
what
just
you
want to
read.
be clear.
Okay,
that
yeah,
we're,
be
you know,
clear.
So I'm sorry, if I do may, I did find page 2. So it's attending all tax board of review meetings, updating tax assessment maps, do the lot mergers and subdivisions, maintaining or assisting the planning department in the maintenance of GIS, supervision and direction of clerical staff, and any other duty that may be required by the town administrator that is related to the assessment of property.
Okay, so that paragraph that is somewhere in the works, that just I happened to stumble across sitting over here, and you read, was that what you were reading a few minutes ago?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So my question is, did you have input to that paragraph with the administrator?
That's 100% my input.
Okay. So now, what about you wear a lot of hats here, as Rob pointed out when you first walked up. So I don't see anything in here that covers those other hats. So I just don't want to get into a situation where someday we have to replace you and, you know, your job description can't be filled because we can't find somebody who can run all the computers in the building and so on and so forth as well. So that's just a concern. But I see this language, though, does not include all the other hats that you happen to wear.
It doesn't, and I think specifically so.
Yeah.
I was hired to be a tax assessor.
Right.
Not hired to be the IT guy.
Right.
So just because I know a little bit more than the general person, I'm more than happy to help out in that regard, but I don't think it should be tied specifically to
Right.
the tax assessor's position.
Okay. So my reason for speaking now was just to make sure that what you were reading was this, and then I just want to confirm that you had input to this and that this does not include those other peripheral things that you do.
No other hats.
Okay. That was all I had.
Thank you. And again, so Nancy's covering for our minutes tonight. We're going to want to reference, this is, since it hasn't been submitted to the committee, but we're speaking to it, it appears to be item E1 from a town council packet. So we just want to make sure that gets sent out to all the commission, part of the public record.
I do have one more question
Yep,
for the
go ahead,
assessor. And I apologize if I missed this. Exceed the 3-year to 5-year, did you, I'm sorry, did you
I
just?
did not. I was taking the 2 items one by one. So I just spoke about item number 1 first. Then I was going to entertain any questions and then go into my second suggestion, which is changing the contract term.
Okay, go ahead. Let it ride.
Okay, so under section 604, it currently reads, the tax assessor shall be appointed by the town administrator with the approval of the town council for an initial contract period not to exceed 3 years. Renewal contract shall not exceed 3 years. The tax assessor shall meet the minimum qualifications, et cetera. So I'm changing the renewal contract period from 3 years to 5 years. And I understand that's I'm probably the only person that has suggested such. My thinking behind that is if I have an initial 3-year contract, or any person has an initial 3-year contract, that person is offered a renewal contract, I would assume that you're happy and content with that person. So extending a little bit longer contract kind of makes sense as far as that person thinking job security-wise. But I think in my particular situation, currently the state is mandating the cities and towns to do a 3-year cycle of evaluations. If you happen to hire someone, and I'm an example of it, during a revaluation year, it can become a little distracting and cumbersome. And in particular, I was hired in 2005. I was hired after the initial contract had been signed and some work had been done. And the contract and the procedures that the then current tax assessor had outlined was lacking in a lot of professional standards. So I think that if you have changes during a revaluation, you potentially open yourself up to, some less than quality product in a revaluation. To be fair and to let you know what the state is currently looking at, though, they are looking to go to a 5-year cycle. So my point would be almost moot.
Go to 7 then?
Yeah. But the issue with that is they've been trying to push this for at least 6 years, and every single year it's failed. Seems to have a little bit more steam this year. I'm not sure it's actually going to be presented this year because they still have some work to do. But just in order of all fairness, they are taking a look at 5 years.
That seems pretty clear. Are there any questions for clarification from the commission? Okay. Anything from anyone from the public? Okay, Jeff?
I do have a question. So on the 3 to 5 years, so we have a 3-year term now. I fully remember when you were hired, actually, right in the middle of the reval. I recall that specifically. I guess, I get the 5-year bit on a renewal. It guarantees anyway that the current assessor, not sort of you, but the current assessor would be seated if they got renewed through a full 3-year reval,
Correct.
a full cycle.
Full cycle. And actually, just for full clarification, when the state's taking a look at a 5-year now, so what would end up happening is you have a full revaluation, 5 years later an update, 5 years after that a full revaluation. However, the in-between years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they are looking to do some type of statistical update. So it's potential that a neighborhood may get reassessed based on sales ratios, and the rest of the town's not touched.
Wow.
But that's a potential impact. But again, it's still in the early stages of development. They're trying to model something after Massachusetts that does something very similar. So my office is going to become much more active and more heavily involved in the next couple of years, potentially, and doing annual assessment updates.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're in good shape. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Ms. Tony Lynn McGowan, our tax collector. If you'd like to come on up, feel free to stand or sit wherever you're comfortable. And the floor is yours.
I did not submit any charter changes to the administrator for this particular revision, and my reason for that was I was under the opinion that the charter recognizes the fact that there is a collector and that job and duty descriptions should be for the personnel board to determine, because it's ever-changing with the new technologies that come in and the things that we're doing to increase our collections. I didn't want to lock that into the charter because, like I say, it does change sometimes on a monthly basis. So for that reason, I did not propose any changes, but I did want to speak, however, on the proposal of combining the collector's office with the finance, as a finance department with the treasurers, and I didn't know if tonight was the night, or there'll be a future date that I'll be invited back.
There will be a future date, but just for the record, this is a current proposal that we have that's already been submitted?
I didn't submit any current.
No, the one you're just about, you wanted to speak to?
There is one, it's proposal number 50,
Perfect.
combining the
That's what I wanted to
collector.
mention, so it's number 50? I just want everybody to have a nice, clear record, so. Okay. So 50 is, and I don't want to put Jeff on the spot here, but our process here is as these come in, Jeff and Donna work together to set them for, if and as time allows, on a space available basis, some preliminary discussion. So there've been a few of these that we have reached. I don't think
We haven't
we
discussed.
haven't reached this one yet. And the idea, we have a very full agenda tonight, but some meetings we have extra time, so we want to use our whole time. So we've started doing non-binding discussion. We haven't reached this one yet, but I'm happy to, if you want to share some comments now, we'll be sure to reach it back out to you. It's at the very latest, it will be back for formal discussion and debate in January, at the latest. And we might be able to slip in some preliminary discussion ahead of time.
Okay.
But if you have a few minutes now, I think you, if
Well,
there's something.
I mean, my major concern about putting the collector with the treasurer's office is both offices act independently, but then work in conjunction with each other as far as auditing purposes. We kind of work as a series of checks and balances. If there's any, thing that isn't balancing in the collector's office, the treasurer's office may pick up on it, or vice versa. So to combine this office in one, I think would be a step backwards for the town, as far as, accountability and making sure that everything is balanced the way it's supposed to be. And I don't quite understand, I guess my question tonight would be what the intent of combining these offices would be. Because if it's a cost savings account, I can show evidence that I don't believe it would be a cost savings account, a cost saving measure. If the intent is to increase efficiency in the department, I can also show areas where I think it would decrease efficiency. So what I would really like to know is, what is the intent of this proposal? And then perhaps I could come up with my arguments to counter why it is in the, not in the best interest of the town.
Okay. Yep. And I'm not even sure who the sponsor is, so and I don't want to necessarily put anyone. Oh, it's you. Oh, well, maybe I will put you on. Sorry. So let's see. There is a form. No, yeah, and we can't go too far off because we haven't noticed this as an agenda item, but this is a great opportunity to talk about the process. So, so Donna Cook submitted this as a commissioner. It's ID number 50, and she did a fine job of using our form. So there's some language in here that explains the change requested, the effect of it, the reason why. And so that's what we have so far. You did have, I'm assuming you had an opportunity to do a brief presentation, much like others are having tonight, and that's the only debate that we haven't.
No, I don't think we did it yet.
Okay, all right. So we're pretty early in this process, so.
So do we know what the purpose or intent of the proposal is?
No, we haven't talked about it yet. But I'll just tell you, I
All right,
saw it.
I'm going to keep this to just a couple minutes,
Yeah.
okay?
No, I-
Because this is not for debate, this is.
Yeah, I don't want to
Okay.
debate. I just would like to know what the purpose of, what the rationale would be to combine these two departments.
I mean, I saw,
Do
I'll
you have
just
a-
say that I saw it in other charters. Other towns are doing it. And some towns are doing it with the assessor collect.
All right, could you give me, so I can reach out to these communities and find out how it's working for them? And, because I don't see it as working well for Tiverton, so I'd like to know how it is working for other communities.
This is the arena for this right now.
All right, well, let me suggest this. There's, I mean,
'Cause we're gonna
obviously,
talk
we will
about
do
it.
this in the public, but there's no quorum problems if you two want to talk offline, that's completely appropriate as well. And what we'll do is we will set this, you must have had an opportunity to do an initial or at least we acknowledged receipt, so maybe that was a very brief conversation. And I can check the minutes on that to see what we have on the record so far.
No, because it would say discussed on here.
Okay, so we may have literally just acknowledged that it was submitted and it hasn't yet been set for discussion or
Okay.
debate.
So perhaps before it goes to
um,
discussion, if someone would like to come to the office and actually see the duties of the tax collector,
Sure.
and that how it would be a cumbersome task to
Yeah.
include them down
Yeah.
to the treasurer's office
Yeah, that's
before such a
that's-
drastic change is made.
Right, yeah. We certainly encourage all the commissioners, and particularly the sponsors, to do as much diligence as possible, so, and I will also take you up on that offer
Okay.
personally, so,
Sure.
if that's okay. So I've said this before, I can't absolutely promise, I might miss one, but we're gonna try to reach out when these come up, for formal debate to make sure that you're given a heads up, although it is on the public agenda, it's on the website, so.
I'll keep monitoring it to make sure I don't
and
miss
keep
it.
checking on there, but, and then I'm just gonna make a note, just wearing just one of 9 hats, that I'll
Okay.
come out and meet with you as well.
All right, thank
Okay?
you.
All right, thank you so much. Were there any questions for the public? Okay, all right. Okay, so is there any objection from the commission or Ms. Surratt or Ms. Spears if we take 3G out of order and have Mr. Spears? Okay, great. So let's, Mr. Jim Spears from the Historical Cemetery Commission, sir? If you'd like to sit or stand, at your pleasure.
I'll stand.
Great.
I've been sitting.
Thank you for joining us.
It was interesting to me when the discussion came up earlier about the emergency management, because I was the very first emergency management director for the town of Tiverton back several years ago.
Oh, okay.
And I served as that for some time
And live to tell.
and lived to tell. And never had any emergencies, but we had one close call with a hurricane. The reason I'm here and the reason I submitted a proposal request is that at least in the Historical Cemeteries Commission, of which I'm a co-chairman, we have had a charter specification of 5 members. We're at currently 3, and we don't get a lot of interest from people who can satisfy the requirements for membership. When I look at the membership of the various town entities, there's people who are elected, there's people who are employees, and then there's the volunteer boards and commissions, which are, we sign up for it and we don't get paid for it, and we don't expect to get paid for it. In the case of the boards and commissions, each board or commission under Article 10 has some wording as to what the qualifications for membership are. Some of them, which are, what I would consider real official town business, like the planning board, requires members to be electors. That's in the section that defines the planning board. Most of the others don't really get so specific. Arts Commission says you have to be a resident and interested in the arts. Historical cemeteries, when I wrote the section, I didn't specify that one had to be an elector or a resident, but only that someone be interested in and qualified to work with historical cemeteries. So we have 3 members right now, which means that if one of us is unable to make a meeting, we cannot carry on town business. And we do manage a certain amount of landscaper operations for keeping certain cemeteries clear. So there's town business here that sometimes we're unable to accomplish. And when you look at attracting a new person, there's a section in the charter, which is section 1010, I believe, no, 1011, general qualifications, which states that members of boards, committees, or commissions must be electors. Now, I would submit, and I'm requesting in my proposal request, that this verbiage is overkill, for lack of a better word. Why should someone who is serving on a volunteer entity be required to be a voting member. A voting resident of Tiverton, okay? Resident is one thing. Voting is a personal choice as to whether you do it or you don't do it. You don't have to vote. You can choose not to. But I have people who have extremely long ties to the town of Tiverton, have great amount of experience with cemeteries and genealogy. One of the services that we provide is helping people track down where their ancestors are buried. And we have people who can really, without too much difficulty, tell you who's buried where. And that's an important piece of information. So because certain people are not residents and/or not a voting person, they may be a resident, but they are not registered to vote, they're precluded from serving on this commission and helping us carry forward the town business. So what I'm asking is to either delete that statement or add an additional statement saying that the town council could waive that requirement on request. Now, let's say we delete the statement and someone who is not an elector applies for membership. The town council has final say-so on who gets appointed and who doesn't. So if they deem that this person is not carrying forward is not interested in carrying forward the interests of the town of Tiverton, they don't have to appoint them. So that puts the ability of committees to be staffed with people who are interested in serving on the committees.
Just a quick question, and I've asked this many times. I think maybe even. Do you see any reason why this commission has to even be in the charter at all? Because the town council, and I've asked this to everybody, so I know it's very important because we could solve all. The town council can create committees at its pleasure any time, and certainly in those cases, there's no requirement for them to be electors or residents. All the
No,
things
that's
you
not true
described.
because it says any committee, board, committee, or commission.
Right, but in practical effect, they can still be supported by staff support, and we can have a debate about whether the subcommittee is a voting subcommittee or it's staff support. It all comes back to the town council anyway. But that is a good point. But I'm just curious because sometimes it's a state law requirement. We've had some requests that you think it's important to have the sort of the gravitas of the charter, the stature of the charter. And I'm not debating, I'm just curious to know if you have a point of view on that.
Well, okay, for historical purposes, we started out as a committee under Jim Towers. And because we were receiving a budget from the town every year through the financial town meeting to pay for maintaining certain cemeteries that were of historical interest to the town, it was felt by myself, the other members of the commission at the time, and of the committee at the time, and people that we talked to, that we should formalize it and write it into the charter, which is what I did, and it was voted on, some years ago.
That's a good point. If there's a long history of receiving funding, that seems to suggest a permanency or maybe a
Correct.
level of importance. Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions?
So just for clarification, it says you have to be an elector of the town.
I interpret
You're
that as
saying
being.
You could be a resident and not an elector?
Sure. You could be a 17-year-old high school student who could otherwise be qualified to join the Historical Cemeteries Commission because they're very interested in working with historical cemeteries, with learning about how cemeteries were created and operated in the old days and interested in maintaining them.
Right.
Because we have 85 or so historical cemeteries within the town limits, and very few of those are
Wow.
actively maintained by anyone. We maintain as many as we can, subject to funding and energy.
Jim, I haven't seen this proposal 70, so I can't really comment on the wording, but would changing the 10, 11 general qualifications, changing the word electors to town resident, would that satisfy your concerns?
It would satisfy part of it, because I have one person that is very interested, who is a resident but not an elector. But I also have someone who has very deep ties going back a couple of hundred years in Tiverton, but happens to not be a Tiverton resident. This person right now is living in Fall River, would like to move back to Tiverton. This person was a resident for many years, but circumstances changed, and now this person is trying to find suitable housing in town and hasn't been able to do that yet. And this person would be a very valuable asset. Now, this issue may apply to other boards and commissions, but I'm only speaking for historical cemeteries.
I believe, Mr. Chairman, that this has come up before, because I have in my copy of the charter that particular phrase, elector, circled with the question town resident. So,
It has come up before, and some of these same types of, we've had some various comments. I mean, you don't have to be a voting member to contribute to a board, right? Or it can be that type of a subcommittee. But as you said, you may have a quorum problem. So that's pretty, that has to be thought of. So it has come up. It's actually come up even for voting on budgets, whether that magic word elector is really the standard. So you're certainly not the first one. And there seems to be, I think it's fair to say, a sense that there may have been, or there may be difficulty in filling, I can't say I know what the exact number is, but I'm wildly guessing it may be something like 125 seats across the whole government with all the, maybe more. And so,
It's probably
it
in that
raises
range,
these
for sure.
questions of and we've had, some great discussion on whether, how much of this do you bake into the charter, or do you just let the town council or the appointing body decide, or the personnel board? So this will actually, I think, certainly get some discussion. Probably will be triaged, I imagine, with some other items.
yeah, I would also suggest that, my guess, first of all, is that you probably don't have a long list of people waiting to get on this commission.
That's correct. If that were the case, I probably would not be standing here right now, because it would be a non-issue.
But it seems to me that, this is probably an ideal case for needing specialized skills and interest that would seem to me there ought to be an opportunity for people with those specialized skills where we don't have other qualified candidates. Seems to me that they ought to be considered. And I'm hoping maybe we could work with Jim and others to maybe come up with some suitable language that would give the town that out, and also allow us to take advantage of these very specialized skills that we might not be able to use under current rules.
Jeff may have,
Jeff,
are you good?
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was looking through the boards and commissions, other than that where it says electors, that the heading is under just a few things, and then it's not under others. It just isn't the art and.
Right, I believe that my
But it's
quick,
not- It doesn't, it's not inclusive of some of the other boards and commissions. It just,
some of them specifically call for electors, like planning, zoning board, and personnel, and I would say that that is a legitimate requirement for those, but for the others, they don't, they're silent on the subject.
I don't see where, like if you pick out Open Space and Land Preservation Commission, I don't see where it says you have to be an elector, am I?
It's this catch-all at
Right, it's-
10,011, and it's
yeah.
confusing, because you have a catch-all, and which seems to be quite broad, but then you have these other ones where they specifically say electors and others don't. So there's,
right.
I think we should clean it up no matter what we do.
Correct.
Even the Town Harbor and Coastal Waters Management Commission, I don't see where it says you have to be an elector
Yeah,
there.
see, it's this catch-all in
Yeah,
1011.
Oh, so this is catching all of this?
correct.
There is.
That's the way it's being
Oh.
interpreted, and that's the way I
Kind
interpret
of
it.
funny, like it's thrown in there, it's like,
But in practical effect, too, I would say that you can at least when it's not a full charter committee, when it's a working group or a body appointed, it's staffed by the town administrator or staff or other interested folks, and when it ends up being advisory to the council anyway, it's not clear to me why you need such a rigid requirement. But we'll debate that later.
Yeah,
Because it's going up to a voting body of electors. So that, at least if nothing else, that's a great place to have some flexibility, it seems to me. I'm a big fan of supermajorities, so when my time comes to debate this, I'll probably see me say, electors are the default unless a supermajority of the town council votes otherwise. There's something that makes you really be put on the spot and say, okay, we had to go outside of the town because nobody applied or because of the special skills. More on that later.
but if you think of special skills, just a couple of weeks ago, we relocated a headstone that had been, there's a historic cemetery in the back of Town Hall, and there was a headstone from Goodwin Warren that had been in the cemetery back here for many years. Through the course of several modifications to Town Hall, it ended up somewhere else. It was in a field. It was finally last year, seriously, last year, we brought it down here. We brought the headstone down here, and a couple of weekends ago, three of us, two members of the commission and a friend of ours, we needed some strength. We actually planted it in the ground out here.
How'd you find it in the field?
The fellow that owns it, that owns the field, I think he knew about it, and I think he finally got tired of hitting it with his mower. And so he pulled it out. No, I'm dead serious. This may sound like a Cats and Jammers Kids kind of thing, but he pulled it out of the ground and put it in his garage, and Gary Plunkett and a couple of us went and got it. This is something that is, well, standing on the ground, it's about this high. Wow. There's this much of it in the ground now. So it's a substantial piece of stone. So it's not something that you or I could pick up. Took several of us to do this. But it took specialized knowledge to know, how do you plant it, where do you plant it, and how do you plant it so that it's not easily knocked over in the future.
It's nice that he even called you.
Yeah, I'm not sure, I'm a little fuzzy on exactly, how the beginning of the story started. I think that was through Gary Plunkett. I sort of came into the middle of the movie.
All right. Any questions from the public for the Historical Cemetery Commission, Mr. Spears? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Jim.
That's a tough act to follow, but all right, Denise.
But the treasurer can
Next,
do
we
it.
have our treasurer. Proposal IDs 62 and 63, which have already been submitted. Now, just before we start, we don't have to, but we have an agenda item for general discussion.
Yes.
If you have the time, that would be great. If you don't have the time, it's
Nope.
fine too.
I had a
So
reminder
if
that
you-
I was going to take questions, and then we had
Yeah.
talked about that and get back to you, unless I
Okay.
could answer them tonight.
Sure, so would you, if you prefer to sit, or, I don't know
No,
how?
fine.
Okay.
I sit all
right.
day.
All yours.
So number 62, do I have these numbers? Oh, I don't have mine numbered. I don't know which one is 62 and 63. Proposal or comment first?
It's, the one I have.
60 is the, oh, you clicked both.
62, I think, has 3 of them on it, doesn't it? 3 different proposals, if I recall.
60 has proposals.
I label them A, B, and C.
This says 62 and 63. not
Right, those are
60.
yours,
Do you have a
correct.
copy? Okay.
But I don't have them
you have
numbered,
it?
so you tell me.
Oh, okay, all right.
So 62 is the one that, excuse me, 62 is, no, 62, though, from what I see, has 3 changes. Okay? Section 602, number 8, and number 10, that's the one. Okay, so we have that labeled as number 62.
Okay.
Okay, and the other one's 63, which I think was just a big comment, which you had a bunch of stuff in, right? Is that accurate? Okay.
Okay, so 602,
62.
number 62 is section 602. The duties and responsibilities, the proposal was to clarify my position, or the treasurer's position, on the police pension board. Right now, the treasurer sits as a voting member, and it's difficult at times as an elected official and a representative of the taxpayer to also sit on the board and make decisions that could potentially affect the taxpayer negatively. You just really have to be able to remove one hat and put another hat on. That being said, there has been discussions in the past about beefing up, if you will, the police pension board and trying to attract some new members. So I thought if that was going to be the case, perhaps this was a good time to adjust this role. What I do primarily on behalf of the pension board is I submit all of the data to the actuary, to the investment managers for their use and for their purposes. So I'm not sure if that role just kind of morphed into a voting member of this board, and they weren't really looking at the role of the treasurer versus the role on the board. So I just thought that this was an opportunity to clarify that.
How long has it been like this, Denise? Like forever?
As long as I've been here. This came to light more specifically when the state started looking at the private pension plans and the makeup of the boards and the role of the members of the boards, and making sure that there was appropriate fiduciary responsibility, and, they had us go to training, and if you were an elected official of the town, how you manage to do this. So, there are some people who manage to do this. I just thought this would be an opportunity to kind of look at this and make the change, if it was warranted.
So Denise, I just see section 8 says serving as a trustee for the Tiverton Police Pension Fund.
I think it needs clarification.
Did you
The
still
trustees
support
of-
it, staff support, but?
I believe I should just be staff support, if you will. But right now, I'm a voting member
Okay.
of the board.
And you feel it's a conflict of interest as your role to be on
It can be, yes,
the side of the table for the taxpayer?
yes.
That's clear enough. Any questions? Okay, number 10.
Number 10 is just clarification, since the wastewater commission is no longer a department of the town and it's a separate entity. And I'm not sure how long the housing authority, I've absolutely never had any contact or need to
They're like their own entity,
They're
right?
their own entity. So I'm not sure if this is old language, but I just thought perhaps
So that needs to be
it's an opportunity to clean it up.
Great,
number.
thank you. Any questions from the commission on number 62 with its two parts, number 8 and 10? Questions from the public? Okay. All right, so 62, my little box here says comment, but these are actual proposals for 62, but 63 is
Right.
a pure comment, okay.
I use two different forms.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're on to 63.
63, I just feel a couple of items. Consideration to increase town council term limits to 4 years and stagger them. I have been in situations where, this has been brought up before for discussion. I've been here 6.5 years so far, and there's been 3 town councils that have turned over. And just from my own personal observation as a taxpayer, it oftentimes takes 9 months to a year before everybody's up to speed, and then by the time they're up to speed, the next election's coming up. So initiatives that they may have wanted to put forward, it just seems to impede the process with the turnover and with not staggering. Even if you left it at 2 years, if you staggered the terms so that you always had some institutional knowledge sitting on the board. Similar to budget committee, similar to planning board, terms are staggered. I don't think it does the town any good to have the entire council or a good portion of the council turn over in 2 years when you think about what they're charged to do.
Because some of them have no history.
Have no history, or, that they just have not had the opportunity to
Right.
complete a project or, one of their initiatives that they bring forward to the table. I feel like sometimes it takes a couple of months just to learn the process and what their role is and what, their responsibility is, and running meetings and all of that. So, just something to consider. The next one involves the 2 elected officials, the town clerk and myself. I know there's been talk, and there's been previous elections where the question has been put to the voters to change those positions, or at least the treasurer's position, from elected to appointed. I understand completely how that backfired several years ago. But I also believe that as elected officials, we are representatives of the taxpayers. And we are a couple of the department heads among the many who are town residents, and we do represent the taxpayer. However, and I don't know how you would do this, but there certainly has to be a vetting process before anybody can get on a ballot to avoid a popularity contest. I mean, there's certain qualifications that you need to do this job. So that's a tall order, but if it's something that you
Yeah,
can work
yeah.
out,
There's absolutely nothing in the charter on what you're stating and the town clerk, that it's just zip in the charter for qualifications for your job or the town clerk.
there absolutely
And
should
it was
be.
just so glaringly obvious to me, and a lot of the other charters do have something. And I'm like, wow.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Did you have any sense of, so I think about how this vetting process, right? So who would do that, right? So it could maybe be the Board of Canvassers up front before a petition is before a candidacy is certified? Or maybe there's no vetting, but then it's a charter violation if a person takes the office if they don't.
That
Those are
would be
the only two
difficult.
I've thought of. I don't know who
Right,
would do the
right.
vetting other than the electorate
I think it's
itself.
something that would have to be done beforehand, whether it was Personnel Board, Board of Canvas.
Personnel board, that's another one, okay. Okay,
I think it would have to be done beforehand because.
probably a little more efficient.
Yes, 'cause to go through the process and then,
Yeah, and then
To undo what you just
overturn the
did.
voters will, yeah. So we're wrestling with that and
Yeah.
see how it goes. Okay.
Yeah, it seems to me, just following up on your comment, it seems to me you've got a couple of positions in this town, the treasurer being one, the town clerk being another, where continuity and institutional knowledge and history is really important. And I mean, what you're describing with the town council would just, it is typical of what's going to happen with this kind of a constant turnover of people. And not only do you have the qualification issue, but you also have, the need for broad knowledge of the way the town operates and, the institutional relationships. So I don't know. I would tend to want to support. I think you were trying to avoid the election of these roles.
no,
No, you want to be elected.
keep the election, but vet the candidates.
So how often do you? I guess I'm not familiar with
4 years. for
how
the
long?
treasurer.
2 years?
4.
4 years.
4 for the treasurer, 2 for the town clerk.
Yeah, I mean, gee, you've got a learning curve and
I would only add, and again, not to sort of debate it here, but at least in my mind, as I start to think about this, I look at some offices have a very robust staff support.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just to show my cards, I don't share the concern about the town council because the town council has a very large professional staff of the town administrator and all the department heads. So, and when it's a body, there are more than one person. But when it's just one person, and this came up with some of the recall discussion, I think, too, that you have to, at least in my mind, think about these a little bit differently. So, when you're thinking about that expertise question, I always say, all right, what other resources are there to support the staff and how many are there? So, these will all be,
well, I don't know. We'll see as we go along. But I tend to come down on the side of trying to maintain the continuity of these kinds of positions in the town government because, there probably are half a dozen or more positions God forbid, if something happened to those people, that we lost all the institutional memory. I mean, my God, we would, we wouldn't be able to function as a town.
Well, I think the position of the treasurer in particular has always been viewed as one as being independent of, and as an overseer, if you will. So changing that to appointed would definitely change the role
Yeah.
and how it was viewed, which I think is why when it's gone to vote before, it's failed. Because some
Right.
people view that as, this is my representative in
Yeah.
the finances of the town.
Well, that's a very good
check
point.
and balance type of.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing that can happen with elected position and not even having qualifications in the charter, as we have right now for your position, is, or any vetting going on, is that anybody can run.
Oh, that's,
You know what I'm saying? And now what do? All right, they get in, and you
well,
can't
that's why I'm
just,
suggesting vetting.
what are you gonna
before they
do?
can
They're
run.
elected, right? Now you got a problem. You know?
I know.
And like, who's gonna talk about that? Is it gonna be the town council? Is it gonna be, everyone knows that maybe they're not doing a proper job, but then it's so political because they're elected that you can't remove them. So now you've got a treasurer's department that isn't running right. It's our money. So it's a problem. So I don't know what the balance is. You know, there's problems with appointed, and there's problems with elected.
Well, I guess my comment would try to balance that out. Find a,
So we'll
find a
have to
happy
talk
medium.
about it, I guess. But
So it is, yeah, it's not going to be easy, but
There's no perfect solution, I mean, yeah, Jeff?
Yeah, I concur with the concern that Donna raised and that Denise raised about there being, you know, absolutely no hard requirements. And so I guess I'm just fast forwarding a little bit and might have to reach out to Denise, for a frank discussion, because she knows the job better than anybody right now, on what would those qualifications be. And I'm just gonna, I don't even know Denise's background, but clearly, she does the job. So, somebody with a degree in finance, I would think could do the job, but I could also see, an engineer doing the job because they're trustworthy and, can do math and understand finance. So I'm just fast forwarding a little bit, I'm fast forwarding a little bit. Someone with an MBA could probably do the job. So, I'm just fast forwarding. So how is this going to get defined? So, and I think this comes in a little bit too, where we spoke last week about somebody, who grows into the job and is quite proficient at it. We've seen that happen before. So I'm just fast forwarding a little bit on, we might want to take this opportunity now to either right now or at some point for the person who's in the job now to at least, give some thought to the type of language that might be broad enough, yet, specific enough. It's tricky stuff.
one thing I would add to that is it's absolutely an accounting job.
Accounting, there you
It
go. I
is
didn't even say that.
accounting, and you didn't say that.
I didn't,
And I
see?
think that is one of the
It's like a
things
controller, really.
that has been overlooked in the past. Former treasurers not being accountants. It is a lot of debits and credits and balancing and reconciling.
So if we, thank you for that. See, there you go. So now we have a huge increment to our knowledge base, at least I do. So now, do you require a degree in accounting? I mean, okay, you could do that, but certainly you can probably go broader than that too if someone has a strong experience in accounting. So, there may not be an accountant in town who's willing to run for the seat. So I'm just putting it out there, like the act, when we get to this, I think there may be a consensus, yeah, we want to do something here, but the language is going to be tricky. And
that's one of the things in the charter it doesn't even address.
Yeah.
Which was, when I read what's in the charter.
Did you put any language, did you put any?
I did not.
Oh, okay, that's what I.
No, that's,
So,
Okay.
I guess it all depends on where this comment goes.
The great irony of it is, we've had the charter says a whole lot. I mean, maybe it's not an irony, but it says a lot. But the appointed boards, most of these, it goes on, and we're getting more and more proposals to add even more. And you could accomplish that by the hiring authority, just general business policy, or through the personnel board. But on some of the most
that
elected
wasn't-
positions, critical positions, that it just literally says there shall be a town treasurer. So it's
Maybe
tricky.
yeah.
there's a reason it's probably that brief, because it might have been in 1994, they struggled with this very question too.
Yeah. I maybe the personnel, at least on my list, I feel like that personnel board might be, we might want to reach out, and they haven't come to visit us yet, right? We may want to try to get a workshop with them.
How the other towns decided to do that? What was the thinking on that?
So did you want to touch on the FTR piece, and then we'll pivot to more of the workshop session?
Just to avoid what occurred in the last budget cycle, if there's an alternate budget, if there's detail supporting the changes.
Can you please explain which cycle you're talking about?
When the budget was cut and it was remanded back to the budget committee.
Which fiscal year is that one?
The one we just ended.
The one we're
17,
16, 17.
16, 17.
So you should have
One of-
been,
One of the FTRs, we'd gotten lots of detail with the elector petition, and that was what was followed. And then I think subsequent to that,
Yeah.
it was remanded back.
So you're suggesting
Just-
eliminating the remand?
I guess I didn't
option?
think of it that way, just
Well,
requiring,
there is a remand option,
okay.
yeah.
but the
Isn't
remand,
budget committee's, sorry, go
the
ahead.
remand option sends it back to the budget committee, who is then to prepare the year's budget in accordance with the budget proposal that passed,
Right.
okay? Under the remand. So what should have been presented at that point to the treasurer was a certified docket by the budget committee
Yep.
that conformed with the vote of the people.
That's right,
So,
that is what happened.
Didn't we get, one year, we got more detail with the proposal?
Well, there
No,
are
I'm-
two
thi-
options.
Okay,
It's up to the
this is
budget
the
committee.
proposed changes, not the adopted. This says the proposed changes. So when the elector comes forward with their proposed changes,
yeah,
we have the detail of the proposed changes.
It depends. They have two options. One is they can go line by line
Okay.
and do.
I guess
their-
I would prefer line by line.
Okay, but there is a remand option where they can
Okay.
put the final.
Just the levy or the
Yeah,
final expenditures.
And then it gets remanded, which is what happened last year. And the budget committee was charged with coming up with fixing
Okay, so I
it.
guess my comment was just allowing the detail.
But I guess what I'm
proposal.
wondering is, from your point of view, at the time
Should have
you
been the
got the
same.
information, you would have had a certified
Oh, yeah.
docket with the changes shown.
This is coming from, like, as a taxpayer,
okay.
Oh,
you know, to vote what the detail is on the proposed changes.
Got it.
Not necessarily what I do in my office
Okay.
after the fact.
That's
This is
important
the
you clarified
proposed.
that, thank you.
Yeah, this is the proposed change.
Okay, so I think we're going to close out item 3. Actually, I'm sorry. Is there any questions from anybody in the public on the comments only, not fixed proposals on 63? Okay, hearing none. So just keeping an eye on the schedule. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I have I don't know if Denise is done.
Well, there was another section here on
something
the
else?
agenda.
yeah, actually, that's,
Oh.
so we're going to pivot now
Okay,
to
because I have a couple of
basically,
questions for her.
this is your moment.
This
So,
is my moment?
This
I-
is your moment.
I think, just looking at the schedule, if we can try to wrap this up by 9, I don't know if you're willing to stay for 20, 25 minutes. It'd be nice if we could protect our third hour for some of the other agenda items. But this is basically just an open discussion, questions you have for the treasurer, where, her function, her role, things like that. I think we've had some questions about, and we're not, if you can't answer them, we will, that's okay, we'll figure it out later, but I know we've had some questions about bonds.
Request a 3-minute break to go to the ladies'
Yeah, why don't we do it? Let's take a 4-minute break, and we'll start right back up at 20 till, and we'll go until 9.